Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris, as always, and we are back to share our thoughts, analysis, reactions to Week 10 of the NFL season. And it was a very interesting week, kind of went the way we expected for the most part. I'll mention more when we do our picks for Week 11. More details on the standings. But I had a solid. Okay, I'll say it. Literally my best week of the year. Granted, it was only one game better than John in terms of straight up, but finally got positive money too. So obviously we'll go into that as we go through each game. But let's officially start. It's week 10. So I always forget. It's 18 weeks now, right? So technically past the halfway point. Oh, this is, buys and such. This technically is the halfway point of the season. And obviously, let's start with the Thursday night game, which for these two teams, it's, I guess, halfway till the real season starts for them, the off season. And it was the Bears that ended up winning this game. It was, as we expected, kind of ugly, but nonetheless, they get the job done, 16-13 for the Chicago Bears over the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, they hold their pick, so it's a double win or double jeopardy. I don't know how I'm going to say that. But nonetheless, John, what were your thoughts on the Bears getting the best of the Panthers?
It was not an entertaining game. I watched it, but not an entertaining game. I don't know. Bryce Young, Tyson Bagent, still kind of waiting for Justin Fields to come back because the Bears offense is pretty putrid, to be honest, without him. It kind of makes you realize that, it's tough because obviously they're in the position where they might be able to get Caleb Williams, but I guess at least for other teams, it makes you realize like the impact Fields had on this offense because DJ Moore is all of a sudden like irrelevant, and that's not DJ Moore's fault. It's just like it shows that Justin Fields is good at getting the ball. Anyway, the real thing that I thought was interesting about this game was I was wondering how it impacts the draft depending on which result was to happen, because obviously the Bears hold both picks, and I didn't know if one was better than the other, because realistically no one cares who won this game. Like, let's just be honest. It was that's the thing that matters. Like, how does this affect the draft? And they showed during the game that I think like if the Panthers lost, then the Bears would have like a 35% chance at getting the number one overall pick, to where if the Panthers won, which once again, the Bears hold both picks. So like, it's just interesting how this works. If the Bears were to have lost and the Panthers won, then that percent would have dropped down to like 22. So I guess good on the Bears for getting the win, because it helped their percent chance, I guess, of securing the top pick. So there you go.
Yeah, not much to add. In regards to that too, we'll talk about them, but Arizona won too, so that helps. I guess that boosts the chances. And just looking at Carolina's schedule, which once again, I'll mention the game here in a minute, but yeah, it's like I could see why, I guess, percentage-wise, because Carolina lost, now it's a greater chance because Carolina has Cowboys this upcoming week, so I feel like we know where that's going to go. Okay, the only games basically they have where maybe are Titans, I guess you can say Falcons later in December, and my Packers. And then, like, other than that, they play pretty much teams that are in the playoff picture, already in the playoff, deeply in the playoff picture. So, yeah, it seems like it's going to be an uphill battle for them to, I guess, get a better positioning in terms of draft capital there.
And importantly, too, I believe the Giants and Patriots play, is it this week? And they're both, like, if the draft were to start today, they'd be the number 2 and 3 picks.
Not this.
So one of them, they play at some point this year. So one of them has to win next week. Yeah. So one of them has to win, right? So that means that's going to bump one of them up. So it was good that Carolina, I guess, lost this game for Chicago. For Carolina, it doesn't really matter that much. I guess it does for like second round pick, but yeah.
Yeah. And in regards to the game itself, I literally only have 2 lines of notes. I did like how they mentioned on the broadcast, hey, it's not really fair to grade Bryce Young right now, and that is adequate because, in getting him, they mortgaged, obviously, DJ Moore and a bunch of other assets. So they kind of hit the reset button I know they're already kind of been in that situation the past years, but obviously going a little bit even further back in terms of progress and with the reset button there, and who knows what they'll do this offseason. But Bryce Young, I will say, once again, not grading him, but this was a concern coming out. Was it does seem like he's going to be a guy, like we mentioned before, that he's going to need some talent around him and such. He's not going to be maybe like his counterparts. We only saw a little bit of Anthony Richardson, but we saw, wow, like he can at times carry the offense on his own, do things on his own. While Bryce Young, it seems like he's going to need the pieces around him, and then he can make them better with just purely his arm. Because the improvisation and such is obviously has not translated to the same level for Bryce Young as expected with his size, and he was already just an above average athlete in college. And there's always that saying, or you could be the fastest guy in college and you come to the NFL and you're one of the slowest guys. That's all I really had on that one, because like you mentioned, it was pretty uneventful, pretty slow game in terms of just quality football. We'll just leave that one at that. Unfortunately, we're going to follow up with another game that, I guess the Colts and Patriots said, we saw the Thursday night game. Frankfurt, we got you. We're going to top that, because it was quite ugly here too for the folks in Frankfurt and for these two teams on Sunday morning. I texted you, like I literally slept through this game. I obviously rewatched it, but so if you're like me and you slept through it, don't care about it, we'll tell you about it now. As the Colts get the win over the New England Patriots, 10-6. Really, it was Jonathan Taylor touchdown in the first quarter, and that was really it for fireworks. And obviously, notably, Mac Jones got benched. So, what were your thoughts on this game, and I guess what it looks like going forward for these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, not a great game in terms of offense. Not a lot going for either team. It was good to see the Patriots really commit to the run game. Yeah, Mac Jones did get benched. Honestly, I didn't even feel like this was actually his worst game of the year. I mean, he was 15-20, so he was moving the ball efficiently, but he did throw the pick. And the turnovers are kind of the thing that kills Mac Jones. But as we saw, even Bailey Zappi, how much better is it really? Like, if anyone doesn't know, at the end of the game, they were down by 4. They're trying to go down, get the touchdown to take the lead, win the game. And I don't know how much time was left when he threw it, but they do a fake spike because they're in hurry up offense. Fake spike, and Bailey Zappi threw it into like triple coverage, intercepted downfield. So end of the game. So I don't know. After the game, Zappi they interviewed him and he was like, I can't say what I want to say. I don't know what that means. And then he said that he just tried to force it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, to that, the I can't say what I want to say thing kind of implies to me like maybe he was about to criticize play calling or another teammate or something. But at the end of the day, you threw it into triple coverage. Like, you didn't have to throw it. Like, you could have thrown it out of bounds. Like, it was a bad throw. So, like, I don't know. It's the same thing that you kind of said about Zach Wilson and the people talking about benching him. It's like, is the grass really greener on the other side? Because that's when we're talking about benching someone, that's really the question here is, like, that guy, the guy that you're talking about benching, sure, maybe he's not the answer, but is the other guy any better? Is he the answer? Because if the other guy's not the answer either, then what's the point of making the change, right? So I don't know. We'll see with the whole Bailey Zappi thing. I'm wondering if the Patriots are going into full tank mode. The reason I say that is that J.C. Jackson, I think this next week, he's like, they're not playing him. Like, he's just not going to be played. Like, they're traded for him, but they're leaving him as a healthy scratch. Christian Gonzalez isn't playing, like, which I know that he dealt with the injury, but I think he's already technically like back. Like, he's good to go. They're just not playing him. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe the Patriots are doing some gamesmanship here and realizing that, currently if the season was to end today, they'd be the 3rd overall pick. And maybe, Belichick is seeing the criticism, seeing all this kind of stuff about his future, and he kind of realizes, like, well, if I want to have another go at it, if I'm not ready to retire, then I certainly don't want the rest of my career to be attached to Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi for that much longer. And so if I can go out there and get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or whoever their target, they got to lose some games. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting, especially, as we were talking about before we started recording. Not this week, but the next week, Giants, Patriots, currently the 2 and 3 pick. Going to be interesting to see what happens in that game because, it might be tank central.
Yeah, that's not what I'm looking forward to putting my eyeballs on at all. But yeah, and I didn't have much else to add in regards to that. I did think it was curious that they benched Mac Jones and then they did throw in Zappy for the last drive, for the drive that, hey, we need you to save us.
That one drive.
So it is a little bit, it feels like a little bit like, in my opinion, like you kind of just threw him out there to throw him out there. Oh, see, like, and now it's like, hey, well, yeah, we did try to throw him out there and see what happened. Like he had an opportunity, he didn't do it. So because it seems like, at least from reports, it seems like Mac Jones is still going to be the starter. So it just seems like maybe a temporary thing because obviously Bill O'Brien was very animated on the sideline after that, after Mac Jones's interception, because they were knocking on the door. They had an opportunity to potentially at least get a touchdown and win that one. And if I remember correctly, too, I think Gesicki was kind of open. It was just a bad ball by Mac Jones.
Yeah, it was not a good throw.
So yeah, it's like one of those where like, Mac, like, I don't know what you want, buddy. Like we served it up for you and you didn't deliver. So yeah, that's a whole interesting process. But yeah, in regards to this one, I mean, not going to criticize the Colts too much. You know, we even knew going into this year there was going to be a learning curve for the Colts, and especially without Anthony Richardson, and you know they're going through that. And obviously, I think we're kind of seeing too overseas. I think that has affected quality of play. We kind of saw it with the Chiefs, Dolphins, and definitely I feel like it affected this one. Although I wouldn't be shocked if even if it wasn't overseas, this one probably would have been around the same, you know, production and stat line. But yeah, just tough loss for the Pats, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward, how they approach the rest of the season. You know, especially just overall, because Bill's been on the hot seat, at least publicly. Who knows if he actually is internally? And you know, we know Mac Jones is definitely probably feeling that too. And who knows how much they're going to clean house if they do decide to clean house Robert Kraft and the front office. But nonetheless, good win for the Colts. Obviously going 5-5, and oddly enough, they're in the playoff picture of the AFC. While, like you mentioned, the Patriots they're already in the bottom of the AFC, so they stay there. But now they are definitely contending for that top 3 pick. So we'll see what happens for those two squads.
Telling you right now, they're going to draft a quarterback, fire Bill O'Brien, hire Josh McDaniels, and back to usual. Or
it'd be crazy if they just say bye Bill and hire Josh McDaniels. I don't know. That would be even wild. I doubt it would happen. It'd just be funny if that's like that's how it go. But nonetheless, let's move over to a couple of good games. Ironically, we got here next. Starting with the game that I think we did expect to be good. Not this much offensive explosion, as the Browns come back to beat the Ravens 33-31. It looked bad at first, especially for the Browns, but they managed to claw their way back into this game, especially in the second half. So, John, what were your thoughts on the Browns' win here?
Really, honestly, impressive win as a whole team. Like, the Ravens were arguably the hottest team in the league coming into that week, and we're looking like, man, maybe the Ravens could even be the best team in the NFL. And the Browns found multiple ways to claw their way back, whether it was the pick six that ended up happening late in the game to, you know, get them a little bit closer, whether it was the Deshaun Watson second half performance. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, it keeps getting hyped up like crazy. Deshaun started the game. He threw a pick six the first play of the game, or well, his first play of the game. First throw, and it got like tipped at the line. Kyle Hamilton then catches it and intercepts it, takes it to the house, which was, you know, only 20 yards. So, and then he started 1 for 9 in the first quarter. Miserable start. And all of a sudden you're wondering, like, man, like, is he still dealing with the injury, all this kind of stuff? Second half goes 14-14 for 150 yards and a touchdown. And, you know, they came back from down 2 scores in the fourth quarter to win. So, yeah, really impressive game from the Browns. They've shown the ability to win in multiple ways, whether it's against the Niners defensively or, you know, in this game against the Ravens. They had a little mix of both with the offense and the defense. So, yeah, impressive win from the Browns. Honestly, I can't give enough credit to Kevin Stefanski, because it was just last year that there was a lot of major questions about him as a coach, this team, all these kind of things. And although I'd give him a little more credit for the sort of offensive side of the ball, obviously as a coach, when, you know, you got a really good unit on both sides, he did good job at playing complementary football the whole way.
Yeah, I mean, especially kind of weathering the early storm, like you mentioned, because they could have been down 20-6 going into half, but then they once again get a blocked field goal. So you mentioned, complete team, all three phases, and that led to, to a Cleveland field goal, which, wasn't that big, but hey, 17-9 looks way better than 20-6. It's only a one-score game from there. And then, like you mentioned, second half, they really took off because, I mean, Baltimore, I'll give them credit rolling early. I think we saw how good these two defenses are, and we saw especially, but I think we saw, that just how good these two teams are on both sides of the ball, like you mentioned. But like I put my notes, great bounce back from Watson after early struggle. Because I was very concerned, like, man, this is not looking good. Only thing I want to add was, like, once again, kudos to Cleveland's defense for sticking with it, and because especially it's tough when to come back to opening the second half, you still let up a touchdown drive. And I know they got another touchdown later, but that was off a muffed punt, so Baltimore's in good field position. So kudos to the Browns defense for making life tough. And the more you think about it, they do match up well with Baltimore because, and this may be an issue for Baltimore, is their wide receivers all kind of lack size. You have Rashad Bateman, you have Odell in his later stages, and he's relied more on his athleticism. Same with Zay Flowers. So the only real size guy you have is Mark Andrews. So just could be a concern, but I'm not overly concerned about Baltimore, quote unquote, dropping this game because it was tough and still first year of Todd Monken, and like we mentioned, Cleveland's really good. So it's an interesting, tough battle, and obviously tough for Baltimore still though to drop that game at home, and we'll see. Hopefully, Ronnie Staley, seemingly, I guess he's going to be okay because they haven't put him on IR. He has not practiced as of this week, so it seems like just always scary because he had multiple knee injuries and he injured his knee on Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see the status of that because he's obviously very key for their offensive line. And that's the other thing I wanted. Sorry, last thing for Browns was they did slow down the run game because that's what's been big for Baltimore the past few weeks is leaning on the run game. And I am curious as to why Keaton Mitchell did not get more touches because it seems like every time he touches the ball, good things happen, as we've saw. Yeah. So I'll be shocked if they could try to integrate him more. I know they love the Gus bus, and he's a good in between the tackles back, but he's limited, as I kind of already mentioned. So big win for the Browns as they go to 6-3. Still technically behind the Ravens in division, but you win it. Could come down to tiebreakers at the end. So every, obviously, especially divisional win is crucial going forward. But that'll do it for that one. Let's move on to one of the other games that, score-wise, it looks close, but it was not very close for most of the day. And it was the Minnesota Vikings. Josh Dobbs continues to impress, as well as the entire team, as they beat the Saints 27-19. Little asterisk for the Saints as Derek Carr did get knocked out early, and Jameis Winston had a come save the day. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Vikings getting the win here?
Yeah, man, the Vikings. I mean, they're looking great. Like they've won 5 straight games, yep. So definitely. They're on an absolute heater, and it's all coming without Kirk Cousins and without Justin Jefferson, which is pretty crazy to think. Like if someone asked before the season, hey, what do you think the Vikings record is if those two aren't playing? There's no way that anybody would be sitting here talking about the Vikings and potential playoff contention, and yet here we are. So good on Minnesota. I believe if the season started today, they would be in the playoffs in a wild card spot, in like the 6th seed probably. So yeah, Josh Dobbs looking impressive. He's having, a good season. I was very impressed with this game specifically because the Saints is a very good defense. And for the Saints, a little bit of a coming back to earth moment, I guess, with unfortunately another Derek Carr injury. But that said, I'm still surprised that they didn't utilize Kamara more. Although I agree, like you said, the scoreboard is a little deceiving. It was not actually that close of a game. I mean, going in a half, it was 24-3. It felt like in the first half, there was definitely more opportunities for them to utilize Kamara in terms of just purely running the ball. He only had 9 carries. Like, it seems like in the first half, I would have tried to get him a little bit more involved while things are still not entirely out of hand. And then the second half, obviously, yeah, you just got to throw more and try and make something happen. So, yeah, good win for the Vikings, man. I thought this was a really impressive one. And for them, you got to really wonder, like, where do they kind of fit in with the league now? Because the expectation was that the Vikings are going to be kind of a miserable team moving forward with no Kirk Cousins, but Justin Jefferson's going to be coming back here soon. And the next handful of games are not the most difficult of teams. I mean, they play Denver next week in primetime, which, we can't sleep on Denver. We'll talk about them later. You got the Bears later, though. Like, that should be a win, especially considering the Bears are probably motivated to lose. You got the Raiders down the line. The Bengals should be a tough game, but I mean, who knows? With the way the Vikings been playing, you never know about that one. Like, all I'm saying is it's interesting. Will the Vikings keep it up? I'm not entirely sure. They still have to play some good teams. Like I said, Bengals, Lions. So it's not like there's a shoe-in for them that they're going to make the playoffs, especially since they have to play the Lions twice to end the season. But the fact that they're in the conversation right now is kind of impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're definitely one of the surprise stories, obviously. Only notes I wanted to throw out was, I mean, kudos to the offense. It's still clicking. And here's something I didn't know, I guess learned day of, or the rest of the public learned. But yeah, apparently Dobbs and Hawkinson do have a connection from working out in the offseason, as you obviously saw with this game, as Hawkinson was heavily targeted and featured, and it worked out there. And obviously, but kudos to Dobbs, too. It's not always sexy, but he gets the job done. And, he, especially with his mobility, extending plays, and being willing to tuck and a run. And I'm surprised the Saints weren't more ready for that. It just feels like that they weren't really ready for that, or I don't know. Like you mentioned, Vikings came out striking hot. I mean, 21 points in the second quarter, and it's not like they got turnovers, like interceptions and good field position. It was off some punts, and they had to make some drives. So yeah, it's a little bit, like you mentioned, concerning for the Saints defense that's kind of been, or a team really, not even the defense just alone, but a team that's been up and down throughout the whole year. And yeah, obviously losing Carr hurts, but even with Carr, like you mentioned, like they were struggling, and then Jameis kind of came in second half, and it was typical Jameis, where, like, of course he starts gunslinging, throwing the ball around, and starts putting up points. And I remember, because I tuned off this game live, and I was like, just keep an eye on my phone. I was like, oh man, like maybe they do come back. The Saints can come back into this one, especially when it was 19-27, and then unfortunately they had multiple opportunities, but it's Jameis Winston, and he threw a couple interceptions. 2 interceptions on the last 3. I mean, technically 4, but the last drive it had like 6 seconds. It was Hail Mary. Yeah, typical Jameis is what I wrote down. Because it's just unfortunate. That's just always going to be a part of him. But it is interesting though that most of Olave and their offensive production success came when Jameis was on the field. But once again, who knows if that was possibly Brian Flores playing conservative or just changing up the game plan a little bit as opposed to what they were going to deal with Derek Carr. So, yeah.
And I do want to add, too, that you were talking about, it's interesting that Josh Dobbs and his running was kind of a little bit of an X factor here. Something to look out for, because not only did Derek Carr get hurt, Marshawn Lattimore got carted off at the end of the game. How serious is it? I don't know. I don't know if they've specified what the injury was yet. But, yeah, like he could be missing time moving forward. And my belief in the Saints all year has been about the defense, and if Lattimore's out and maybe running quarterbacks tend to be a little bit of a weakness maybe for them moving forward, it's just something to look out for, because that could kind of unravel the Saints the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, just a note, at least just for ESPN, so it could be, I don't know, they've had inaccuracies before. At least it says Lattimore had a high ankle sprain, so we know those can typically be a couple of weeks sometimes. So yeah, like you mentioned, they could be out with him, and also could be out with Michael Thomas for a while, because apparently he's dealing with a quote unquote fairly significant knee injury. And I know he's not the Michael Thomas of old, but he's been a solid number 3/2 for them this year. And obviously we'll see what happens with Derek Carr, because apparently it's that lingering injury is the right shoulder, which I believe is the same shoulder he hurt earlier this season. So yeah, we'll see if the Saints can bounce back, pull the Vikings themselves and kind of revive or their playoff hopes. As you mentioned, the Vikings are hot. They are technically on the longest active winning streak in the NFL at 5.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, who knew at 1-4 lose Justin Jefferson, and then a couple weeks later you lose Kirk Cousins, that they would still be here in the thick of things at 6-4. Like you said, the number 6 seed as of right now, if the playoffs were to start today. So,
yeah, I remember talking when they were 1-4. Like, man, it kind of sucks. Kirk won't waive the no trade clause, so they can get rid of him and just kind of commit to the future, try and get a high draft pick. And yet here we are, 5 games later, and they've won all 5. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, especially with multiple without Kirk Cousins.
And that's like, it's not like they only played chumps. Like, they beat the 49ers. Like, like they played some good teams, right?
Yeah, they have. And, like I said, and with lesser, like the story last week of Dobbs being thrusted in, and now this week still, obviously has a week. Doesn't even know what the locker room is. Doesn't matter. Just give the guy the football and he'll figure it out on the field. So, big win for the Vikings as they bolster.
I did want to add to the thing that I texted you of. He's this year's Geno Smith. Like, remember last year, Geno and the story and, the iconic moment too. Iconic may be strong, but where he was like, they kind of wrote me off and I didn't write back, like that whole bit. Like, Josh Dobbs didn't have the same expectations when he came into the NFL, so it's not quite a they wrote me off thing, but the feel-good story of this guy who's been a backup for a long time and he's balling out right now. Like, maybe that earns him a starting job moving forward. I don't know. Like, if he keeps this up all year, it's kind of hard. Probably not the Vikings. Well, maybe the Vikings because Kirk's contract runs out. Who knows? But it's hard to not envision another team maybe giving him a shot.
Yeah, I mean, he could at least be a bridge guy for a team, or maybe a high quality, high tier backup like a Minshew or someone where he'll maybe find who knows. But regardless, for Dobbs, good for him. He's should hopefully see a payday at least and maybe find a permanent home for a bit. We'll see because who knows. But like I mentioned, Vikings get the big win there, and we'll see how they keep progressing going forward with this kind of ragtag group. They did lose Quan Alexander, and they're picking up Anthony Barr out of retirement, or off the street, as Justin P would say. So we'll see if he can come back and contribute to that defense. That as well, I do want to shout them out. That and we've mentioned before where they've been kind of overachieving with Brian Flores there. So Vikings, maybe keep your eye on them, people. At least if you're a playoff team. They're not my team. My team are not capable, nonetheless. But speaking of playoff teams, let's go over to the AFC, where this probably, once again, the early slate had a lot of good games, and this is one of them. As the Houston Texans pull off the upset in Cincinnati over the Bengals, 30-27. I'll just throw it to you right away, John. What were your thoughts here on this upset?
This felt like, obviously CJ Stroud's got a lot of hype going into the season, and the way that he's played so far, but this felt like the game where it kind of cemented him for a lot of people. I'm not going to say that he's, elite or anything yet still because he's a rookie and a sample size and all these things, but what an impressive game. Back-to-back games in which he led a game-winning drive to get in field goal range and take the lead. Does it against Joe Burrow. They're going toe-to-toe, blows. They're both swinging, both having big drives at the end of the game. And, C.J. Stroud showed that ice-cold ability to come out on top against a really good team. Like, doing it last week against the Buccaneers is one thing. Doing it again against the Bengals, who I think have a better defense. Obviously, Joe Burrow's going down, and he's being clutch on the other side. He's leading these game-leading drives. Like, Jamar Chase is making big plays. It was definitely a very impressive game from C.J. Stroud. So, yeah, good job for the Texans. I mean, also not even just a shout-out Stroud. Devin Singletary, a guy that has kind of been iffy a lot of his career. He had a monster performance, 30 carries. Shout out the offensive coordinator for continuing to run with him, but 30 carries for 150 yards and a touchdown. That's huge. Noah Brown, another huge game. Tank Dell once again getting in the end zone. The Texans are looking good, man, and now they're 5-4. If the season ended today, they'd be the 7th seed in the playoffs, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about C.J. Stroud in the MVP conversation. Like, this is kind of a crazy run that the Texans are on right now. And, I mean, although the Bengals are also 5-4, so record-wise, you would think they're not that they're not doing that great. I mean, they had won 3 straight, like coming into this game, so they had been on a hot streak too, and the Texans ended that. So, yeah, really impressive game from the Texans as a whole, not just Stroud. You know, I know that I started off talking specifically about him, and he's getting a lot of attention, but yeah, like the other guys are getting involved too, like Singletary, like Noah Brown. So, yeah, really impressive game from the Texans as a whole. Shout out to that coaching staff, D'Amico Ryans, for just, I mean, finding a way every single game, finding a way.
Yeah, I do want to start. I'll start there too, where you left off, because there was a good period of time too where the Bengals offense couldn't really do much. I mean, they came out with an opening drive touchdown, but next was it 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the rest of the drives of the first half, all they did punts for them, and most of them 3 and outs. So obviously he went back and saw, I guess, either. I'm curious to hear, whether regardless, it seems like he went back and saw the 49er game and was able to make some adjustments maybe. And it's obvious that, the 49ers miss him, because their defense has been up and down. And once again, I know they didn't do amazing, but to at least help your team settle in 10-7. Now you go in the second half. Hey guys, like we're up, like we're in this game. That's obviously big. And yeah, especially without Nico Collins too, though, on offense. I know he's not a superstar, but none of the receivers really are, all young guys. But the fact that I'm going to mention again that Noah Brown, 6th year in the league, second straight week where he's just been balling out. Like, once again, maybe he can be a good player for them. But regardless, the fact that they're able to fit these guys in, and you mentioned their offense, Bobby Slowick, he could easily be a guy, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens after if he does leave. But he could be a guy that gets poached in this offseason because people say, ooh, like, because he's doing good things. He's tying, like you mentioned, the balance for the Texans has been huge. I mean, yeah, you mentioned Singletary had a great game, and I'm just saying Buffalo might be looking over there and scratching their heads a little bit because they let him walk. He never really did that for Buffalo. Yep. Just saying, and Houston's
same with Zach Moss,
yeah, and Houston's
Indianapolis
lesser talent, definitely less talented than Buffalo, even right now. So that's something to look at. But yeah, in regards to Stroud, because I'll wax a little bit poetically about him. Yeah, I mean, he just always seems to throw the appropriate ball. And rarely do I see, sometimes we see, it's behind the guy, and then it leads to a turnover or something, or just incomplete. And yeah, just time and time again, he just third downs. There's like a 3rd and 14 too. Doesn't matter. The dude just usually Stroud delivers, finds a way to make a play. And honestly, I wrote this down. I think this was his best game in regards to improvising, which is funny because remember that was the huge knock on Stroud was, can he improvise? Can he do more than what the play asks? And we saw that obviously with the rushing touchdown and multiple times on those third downs where, play broke down. He had to get out of the pocket and just, make a play on the run or a throw on the run. And he did. And it's not like Cincinnati's defense is, what's the word? Is chopped liver. They're pretty. We mentioned they're pretty good defense. I think we saw the youth of their secondary a little bit. A couple of PIs on DJ Turner and such, and they did get beat a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, I like what I'm seeing from Houston offensively. Not just Stroud, but the whole thing, because they are aggressive too. They don't just give Stroud. These aren't just screens that are being taken to the house like a la Jared Goff in LA. Like Stroud's having to make reads and throw it down the field to the likes of Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz. And I mean, Tank Dell could be a guy. He's looking pretty good too, but still doesn't have that marquee guy like everyone else has. So yeah. Other thing I wanted to note too, sorry, for Houston offense was interesting that they were able to run the edges. They just said, especially most of their success. So it'd be interesting to see if teams replicate that against the Bengals going forward. But yeah. And then in regards to Houston defense, I do want to give one more last thing to them. I liked how they showed different looks. Did not let Joe Burrow made life hard on Burrow. Not just showing him, hey, we're in cover 2. Hey, we're 2 safety. They did a lot of different guys at the line. They never let the Bengals really kind of settle in and know what they were doing on defense. So I think that helped as much as it could because the Bengals still made plays and such. And yeah, tough job for Tyler Boyd because that probably would ice the game. Or, at least won them the game, or who knows. But, on the Bengals last drive, I don't know if you did see that. That was rather unfortunate because it was literally right in his hands. But, they had to settle for a field goal, and Stroud had more time this week and definitely made all the plays. So, yeah, great win for the Texans. And, yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know about for you, like, once again, it just feels like there's no clear-cut MVP. So, once again, I'm not saying he's going to win it, but he's in the conversation. He's entered the bar. He may not be one of the main patrons, but hey, I mean, if he keeps playing this way throughout the rest of the season, and especially if Houston makes the playoffs, I'm just saying, I there's no clear cut guy right now. I mean, maybe Tyreek and stuff, but Tyreek, I mean, then not really clear cut. So, yeah, we'll see if Stroud can keep, and the Texans can keep wowing us and just staying ahead of schedule, because they're only one game behind Jacksonville now. So anything else before I can move to the Jacksonville game?
I just want to say that this, I mean, when I say this statement, it's going to sound crazier than it is, but this is the greatest rookie season we've ever seen from a quarterback ever.
Yeah.
Like, and that statement sounds crazy, but when you actually look at the stats, like, the most touchdown passes by a rookie quarterback ever is Baker Mayfield. So, like, I think it's like 27. Stroud should hit that number potentially, or around that number. And when you add in the fact that he's not throwing any interceptions, he's winning big games. You throw in the context of the roster as a whole that's around him. This is the best rookie quarterback we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, you and I both thought he was the best quarterback in the class, and I don't think that either of us thought this would happen.
No, I didn't expect that this would happen as quickly with it. Yeah, just regarding like you mentioned, the environment around him did not seem like it was ready for them to lift off this year. It seemed like it would be at least another year or two. I did not expect her to be sitting here week 10 that, hey, they're in the playoff picture and they're only one game away from leading the division. So, yeah, just wild stuff, but hey, that's the NFL, baby. And yeah, he seems pretty pro ready, John, as opposed to the people that did, the whole whatever that dumb test was and whatever, saying that he was not, he wasn't going to have success. So, speaking of those Jags that I mentioned, that the Texans are only a game behind. Like I mentioned, they had an opportunity to go up. They could have been up 2 games and had a good cushion, but unfortunately, kind of had a coming to earth party for the Jaguars as the 49ers let out their frustrations of their recent loss streak onto them. It was a beatdown, 34-3, San Francisco. What were your thoughts here?
I mean, good bounce back game for the Niners. I'd love to sit here and say that, they had their bye week and they bounced back, but the Jaguars had theirs too. So it's, I think just simply put, it showed the talent difference on the trenches. Like, we know how talented Etienne, Lawrence, some of these guys are, but if your offensive line can't hold up at all, I don't know what you're expecting the offense to do. And it was very clear the defensive line for the Niners, with the addition now of Chase Young, was controlling the game, because it felt like every single drop back, Trevor Lawrence was getting hit, whether it was a sack or, he throws the ball, but he still gets just destroyed. That's how the game was going. He looked very frustrated. He turned the ball over multiple times. They were not able to commit to the run game because, the defensive line was solid. Like, they didn't totally destroy the run. Like, Etienne averaged 3.9 per carry on only 9 carries. So maybe they could have ran it a little bit more. It's just the problem was they got out to that lead pretty early. Like, it was 10-0 at the end of the first quarter, 13-3 going into halftime. Not totally unreasonable, but then third quarter, another 14 from San Francisco. Now you're down 27-3. Like, it's, what do you want to do? So you can't really run. You got to commit to the pass. But then when you try to pass, the line can't hold that defensive line. And meanwhile, your defense didn't have a great day. Couldn't stop McCaffrey. I mean, the guy averaged almost 6 a carry. Same with Debo. He got a touchdown rushing. Like, whenever they ran the ball, they could do whatever they wanted. Purdy was able to be efficient passing-wise. Kittle had a bunch of big plays. It's just overall, I mean, simply put, San Francisco they won the battle in the trenches, and it showed up big time in the rest of the way the game played out.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I wanted to start. Was you mentioned the defensive line, obviously a little more talent there, but I think also it showed. I mentioned Wilkes needed to be a little more creative, innovative. You think he coming off the bye week, he definitely showed that, at least this game. A couple of 5-man fronts, just different fronts, different moving guys around. I think that at one point Chase Young was over the center and such. Just giving the Jaguars and their pass protection rules, just stressing them out, making them think and talk. And obviously it worked out, as you mentioned, because Trevor was under siege all game, and they also weren't able to get the run game going. And that's what I did want to note is it just seems like as of recently, the Jags have been leaning on the run game, and I guess that was something that San Francisco noticed they took that away from them, and we kind of saw a little bit we saw earlier in the season where the offense struggled. Now, obviously, San Francisco's a really good defense too, so that's tough. And like you mentioned, the game kind of played it the way San Francisco wanted to, especially in the second half where they started getting ahead. Now we know you're going to pass on when you're on offense, Jacksonville. So our great pass rushers can all just peel their ears back, and our linebackers can just fly around and do their thing, as we well know very well. Only other thing I want to note too, San Francisco offense, I mean, did what they want, especially in regards to the run games. That'll be something to look at the Jaguars for. Once again, like we mentioned, San Francisco, Shanahan have a great run system. And important note too is they're finally fully healthy. Obviously missing Trent Williams. I feel like that's been an under talked about loss, and we saw that affect this game as he was opening holes, whether in space or on the line. And then obviously Debo too. Debo helps in regards to another rusher, but also another guy that can take some of those short works to screens or such, and make more out of that, like we always mentioned. So yeah, it was just San Francisco getting back on track, and a little bit of slap of reality for the Jaguars. And yeah, I think it'll be good for them, because I think Niners are the more physical team, and I think that's something that they can look at going into the playoffs. Is, hey, we need to bring that level. We need to match, not only match, but exceed that intensity when we play the Kansas City Chiefs, the upper echelon teams. So, and
I just want to say too, I know the bye week probably plays into this, but the amount of people that are now like they've flipped on the Jags, like, they got destroyed. Like, come on, they won 5 straight before this game. Like, let's not act like the Jags are all of a sudden in shambles. Like, let's calm down.
Yes, and like we said, they're sending teams. Sometimes you need these games to. I mean, even I look back in the year where the Eagles won it, with Foles and Wentz, and I remember they lost to Seattle, which at the time Seattle was probably like San Francisco, and they lost to Seattle, and there was a little bit of panic there. But I remember the players said afterwards, like, it was a good loss for us. We learned, and then I think they didn't have to play Seattle, but just playing, a team that's won or been to the big stages, and an elite team that can just help what your holes are, help what you need to improve upon going forward, or at least what the standard needs to be to play that team. So I'm sure Doug Peterson will get them on track going forward, because as we mentioned, there is still a lot of talent on that team. So let's go from that one. We're gonna have a couple stretch of some poor games, but I'll try to keep it quick. This one definitely I'll try to keep quick, as what used to be a vaunted matchup back in my day, which is about 10 years ago, not so much anymore, as it was the Steelers hosting my Green Bay Packers. Steelers win 23-19. So a little bit more scoring than at least I expected, especially in regards to the first quarter. It was only 7-7 in the first quarter. But nonetheless, any thoughts here, John, in regards to the Steelers win?
They held on strong. It was nice to see that. I think they're kind of starting to realize that maybe Jaylen Warren deserves to get more involved. It was interestingly, which, kind of a little bit of a flashback here, but a very efficient game from both running backs, both Najee and Jaylen Warren. Warren averaged 6.7 yards per carry. Najee averaged 5, 183 yards between the two. Both scored a touchdown. So they were kind of able to do whatever they wanted in terms of running the ball. So that was good for Pittsburgh. They keep it moving. They're 6-3. Once again, continuing to prove expectations wrong. But I think, like I said, the nice part for me was seeing it was basically a dead even split. More Jaylen Warren getting involved. Not to say that Najee Harris needs to be completely written out of the offense, but I do think that honestly Jaylen Warren's probably the better back at this point. So that was good for them. And for the Packers, I don't really have much to say. I'll kind of let you, as the Packers fan, take it.
Yeah, I'll mention that in a second. Let me piggyback what you said about Pittsburgh running backs. Yeah, I agree. I think Warren's a more explosive back, which is an issue. It was a concern for us with Najee coming in, was he didn't have the top end explosion, that maybe some of his counterparts in the league would have. I think we're seeing that. He's still, like you mentioned, I think it's good that he still has a role. He's obviously still very good, and it'd be interesting to see. Typical Pittsburgh that they'll probably roll with those two guys, and hopefully they didn't need the pass game, and they really haven't needed it. And that is one thing I want to note. I mentioned it last week. Is just they always do a great job of, at least the offense. At least they don't turn the ball over. So I guess kudos to them. And they find ways to move the ball. They got that run game going the past 2 weeks, so that's probably going to be their mantra going forward. And for the Packers offense, I just wrote same shit, different day, because it's really what it is. I mean, times you see, oh man, like hitting Luke Musgrave deep, but it's that the inconsistency with Love and his decision making and throwing at times can be killer. And I know once again, still a young team. We got the run game going a little bit. I'm surprised. I wanted a little more AJ Dillon because Pittsburgh is one of the lesser teams in run defense, but I'm not the play caller. But nonetheless, especially with the injuries had, I'm not saying injuries were an excuse, but hey, third string cornerbacks, that never helps on the Packers defense. So yeah, I'm just very interested to see what we'll do going forward. And yeah, I mean, for Jordan Love, once again, in regards to the offense, so turnovers, obviously 2 interceptions. Think you really don't want that in defensive battle. And he had a couple of poor ones there. So yeah, nonetheless, Pittsburgh finds a way. It's just a perfect Pittsburgh game where they win the turnover battle, they win, even though for the 9th game, or basically every game this season, they have been outgained, and yet they are sit here 6-3, which is kind of wild, but is totally Pittsburgh. So kudos to them there. They get the win as they are right in the playoff hunt and right in the hunt for their division title, as they're only a game behind Baltimore. And I believe, let me double check, I believe they do play this weekend, so that might literally decide the leader. No, they play the Browns, but still big game there in regards to the division. As we mentioned before, the Browns also 6-3. So yeah, tough loss to the Packers, big win for the Steelers. Let's go over to another cross-conference matchup between the Bucks and Titans. Another one that didn't have many fireworks, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take care of business, 20-6. Your thoughts here, John?
I don't really have a ton. I mean, to be honest, it was an okay game. Like, there was a lot of Mike Evans going on, which was good to see. There was a lot of Rachaad White, which we've seen quite a bit throughout the season. I mean, he's getting a ton of volume. It wasn't efficient in this one, but he still got a lot of work, and he had that one explosive play through the air. But other than that, I mean, just kind of business as usual for the Buccaneers. It feels like they're kind of always hovering around that 20-point margin, unless, they get some of those crazy high-scoring games like they did against Houston. But other than that, that's like kind of where they typically are. And then on the other side, rough game for Will Levis. I think it also comes off the fact that Derrick Henry had a terrible game. And, it's another example of, running backs, right? Like, Derrick Henry has had some good games, some terrible ones. This is one of the terrible ones. 11 carries for 24 yards is just simply not going to cut it. And we saw that trickle over to Will Levis, completing 50% of his passes, 199 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick. It's just, I'm not going to sit here and say that he had the worst game ever, but it's hard to expect Will Levis to go out there and just absolutely carry you when you can't run the ball at all. And it wasn't just Henry, too. Tyjae Spears only had 18 yards. So, yeah, I mean, the Titans just simply, we know the issues with the Titans, and it's not entirely their fault. They've tried to get weapons. They bring in Hopkins. They drafted Treylon Burks, all these kind of things. But you can't help but wonder, man, if maybe they just kept A.J. Brown. They're willing to pay him. They tried to build around him. Could maybe they have made some more things happen here because, credit to Hopkins and some of these other guys, but they're not the playmaker that A.J. Brown is, right? Yeah. And like I said, as it's the same, people are talking about Bryce Young, all that stuff. It's even more emphasized for Will Levis because this is his 3rd career game, 2nd career start, or is it 3rd career start?
I think so, 2nd start.
Yeah, 2nd start. So overall, I mean, like, what do you really want out of Levis here? You can't run the ball. Treylon Burks is even out there, so you got even less playmakers, and it's just tough. So yeah, tough game overall from the Titans offense.
I'm sorry, 3rd start. The Pittsburgh game is that he played. I forgot that they played Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if he started that one.
He did. That was a Thursday night game, and I just pushed that out of my mind because I'm sorry, Pittsburgh and Tennessee, but that was a stain on my memory. At least in regards to this one, yeah, you mentioned Levis still raw, like you mentioned, and just doesn't have a lot of help around him. So what do you expect? And I know once again, the great debut, but now that team saw it, it's obviously that they're not going to leave DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one and give him free opportunities to just chuck it up to him. But yeah, still some things to work on with Levis. Obviously, he's still getting adjusted to the speed of the NFL. I feel like at times he was late just in general, just slow to make his progressions. And once again, probably doesn't help that not many guys are getting open. And, probably just needs to learn a little bit to get out of dodge, get rid of the ball and such. But those are things that I'm sure they'll iron out. And, the only note I mentioned was, lack of talent on offense, very apparent for the Titans. But I feel like we've been saying that every week this year. So, and, Tampa, the only thing I want to add is, they had the right game plan. It also was a bit of a poor matchup. They do still have a solid run defense. And like you mentioned, Tennessee, they needed them to get the run game going, to get the play action, deep bombs going, and that just wasn't going to be the case. So, kudos to Tampa for having the right plan of approach. And I do want to shout out Mike Evans because I thought he was going to be, last year looked like he was starting to hit the decline. And this year he's kind of bounced back a little bit. He's had a really good year with Baker. So,
just keeps doing his thing.
Yeah, just keeps quietly doing his thing as a great receiver down there in Tampa. So we'll see what happens there. But good win for the Bucks. And Titans still rebuilding, so not a shocker that they kind of put up a stinker there. But let's move over to the afternoon games on Sunday, starting with the game that was definitely the best of the slot in terms of competitiveness. Although there was another one down there that was pretty good, but this one did not disappoint. I was sweating through it as I was texting you. As if you remember some of y'all remember the picks, I put 600 on the Lions, and luckily they prevailed for me as they win 41-38. Literal nail biter, went down to the last second field goal. What were your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Lions getting the win over the Chargers?
Yeah, it was a shootout. I think we saw the weaknesses of both defenses, really. For the Chargers, they could not stop the run. Overall, David Montgomery was able to do what he wanted, including, that one huge explosive run, which does inflate his stats a little bit. But Jahmyr Gibbs also had a really solid day. So you see both running backs doing their thing. Of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown having a good performance. So the Chargers defense did not look good. Jared Goff, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the same goes on the other side for Herbert. Like, he did have the 1 interception, but other than that, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. And, it was all a lot of Keenan Allen. So big scoring game. And this is the concern for me for both teams is the defense. And obviously for the Chargers, it's been a little bit more of a hindrance as the offense has kind of been inconsistent with injuries and all these different things. Eckler hasn't really been that useful. He had a solid game here, but even then 3.5 yards per carry, like not efficient at all. So yeah, I don't know. It was a tough loss for the Chargers. You could have been 5-4, which would have had some solid momentum and maybe pushing towards a playoff spot because like the 7th seed, that's the Texans at 5-4 right now. So they're certainly still in it. They're not out of it. And it's encouraging that they can go out there and go toe-to-toe with the Lions who are 7-2. But even for the Lions, like this is my worry, right? Is I don't think their defense is that great. I think they have a good defensive line, but the secondary is questionable to me, and Justin Herbert and the offense were able to kind of expose that. So, yeah, good win for the Lions. I texted you after, I can't believe Vegas put the line at 2.5, and it literally was, they won by 3. There's just so many games like that where they nail it. They nail those spreads, so they know their stuff, which is, why they make so much money off of it. But yeah, for the Lions, it was good to see that they were able to have that sort of offensive production, but I certainly think that the defense needs to be a little bit upset about the way that they played in this one, because allowing 38 points to the Chargers and putting your offense in a position where they have to put up this many points is certainly not a way that you want to win every single week. So yeah, both teams certainly have a lot to improve upon moving in the next week. And I will finally add that if you're one of the people that is blaming Justin Herbert for this game, as I saw afterwards, that is ridiculous. The guy drove his team down to score and tie the game. He didn't get the ball back. The other team had the ball, and they won the game. What more do you want from the Chargers offense? They scored 38 points. They lost. That's crazy. To blame Herbert because he threw 1 pick is absurd. He made 1 mistake. What about the 41 points worth of mistakes that their defense made, So, yeah.
No, I'll get to that, to the Chargers offense in a second. I want to start with Detroit's offense, like you mentioned, because you already hit it. That's what I wrote. They just mashed the Chargers. That David Montgomery one you mentioned, he was untouched Like he was untouched, and it was like not like a stretch. It was like kind of like a power, like inside the tackles, when it just went all the way. Like he was untouched the whole way, and like, he's not. David Montgomery's not the speed of Jahmyr Gibbs. Once again, not like he just absolutely outran every. I mean, he technically did, but you know what I mean. So that was just goes to show how great the offensive line is, and just how poor the kind of Chargers run defense is. Like you mentioned, just got mashed early on by Gibbs, then they kind of went more Montgomery late. So I don't know if that's going to be their plan, is to kind of use Montgomery as the change of pace, more power guy. But yeah, so obviously run defense still a concern for the Chargers, just in general, because even when the Detroit was able to do play action off of that, it was just, I mean, the touchdown of Brock Wright, no one was around him. And yeah, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown 8, and we all kind of know that's who they mainly want to feature in the passing game. And yet the Chargers were unable to slow that down on defense. And then on the flip side, yeah, I mean, even that one interception, like Herbert was trying to throw it away, and honestly, just kudos to the defensive back for just flying to the spot and getting it, like literally toe tapping in. And once again, with a little bit of context, the Lions didn't score off that either, so it was technically turnover on downs because they went for it on fourth down. But which also I want to note that too. Sorry for the Lions offense, like they even went for it. It was like, it reminded me of like when the Packers played the Niners and Raheem Mostert didn't stop running, because there was a 4th and 5. I don't know if you saw it. It was 4th and 5, John, and they ran it, and they still got the first down. Like, come on, like that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I just want to note that. Sorry, going back to Chargers offense versus Detroit defense. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Detroit defense still lacking. I wrote the same thing in regards to like front four is good. Obviously, Ian Hutchinson's amazing, but yeah, they need like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They need someone else in the secondary that can either lock someone up or just make plays. And I know they're still young, so maybe they'll find someone down the line or sign a free agent or something. So, but in regards to this year, yeah, that is a major concern. So we'll see if that's, obviously, like we mentioned, against the elite of the elite. Are they getting in their division against the Cowboys? I would put obviously the Niners and Eagles. Those are probably the elite teams of the NFC. All those teams have good quarterbacks that can shred a secondary, and yeah, especially since Detroit mainly predominantly a zone defense too. It was just, like you said, too easy for Herbert on the other side for the most part, and really it was just Herbert and Keenan Allen, because I mean the other guys sprinkled in, but really even Keenan Allen had an amazing game here too, and he even left for a good portion of the second half to go to get checked out for his injury, and came back and still got another touchdown. So yeah, it's we'll see if Detroit can kind of overcome that and figure that out going forward. And obviously for the Chargers, sorry, wrong LA team. For the Chargers, just seems like we're just counting the days till Staley gets let go, because like we mentioned before, he's a defensive coach and his defense is getting destroyed here, and they've invested a lot into that defense via free agency. J.C. Jackson didn't work out. I mean, Khalil Mack's been solid, but then paying Joey Bosa that big money, and apparently, like you mentioned last week, they're he's oddly kind of on a weird snap count or something. Who knows? Maybe they're trying to prevent him getting injured. I don't know. But yeah, other than that, like no one else is. Asante Samuel's kind of fizzled out after having a good start. So and then Derwin James got flagged a couple of times this game too. So they got things to work on, the Chargers, and they got to figure it out fast, because, like you mentioned, it's an uphill climb for them in the AFC at 4-5. While the Detroit Lions kind of comfortable in their division, and like we mentioned before, pretty easy schedule to go out. So wouldn't be shocked if they continue to ride this boat going forward. But let's move over to the other exciting game. I guess I flipped them around. Oh, no, not that one. Let's go to your game first. That's what I had in here. I literally wrote down no notes, because I feel like no notes were needed for this one, as your Cowboys take care of business and dominate the Giants 49-17. Floor is yours, my friend. Any thoughts?
I mean, the line was huge, and I remember saying that still doesn't feel like enough, and it wasn't. The Cowboys destroy them. They were able to do whatever they wanted. I mean, there's really nothing to talk about in this game. Yeah. Like, the Cowboys are just the significantly better team, and the Giants are starting to potentially look towards the future. They're sitting at 2-8. You're on your third string quarterback. Like, what are you really going to do? What are you going to do?
I mean, it was kind of, all of that was kind of summarizing the fact that it was a fourth down, or near the goal line. I'm sure you saw it, where they ran it. It wasn't like a 4th and 1. It was they're at the Dallas 4. So 4th and 2. Maybe granted, maybe you get the first down, but really you're at that point kind of going for the touchdown. Because 2 anyway. But yeah.
And for the record, too, the only reason they had the ball in the goal line or in the red zone was because the one interception Dak threw like late. So they got the ball in the 12. So like, don't think that they could drive the ball because they couldn't drive at all. Like that was the only reason they had the ball that deep in that territory was because of that, and they did not score. So
yeah. So I like I literally wrote no notes. I almost forgot about skipped over that. Thank goodness I remembered. But I didn't. It's no notes were needed. Dallas took care of business and did what they did and dominated the Giants. And yeah, like you mentioned, Giants will definitely be in the top 10, probably top 5 in terms at the end of the year in terms of draft capital. So we'll see what direction they go going forward, and if they can at least salvage the season and maybe find a few gems or guys that they can build with going forward. Sorry, last note, nice to see Brandon Cooks have a great game too, because I'm sure that's a good confident boost going forward for your passing offense. But let's move over to the other game I mentioned that was pretty competitive and went down to the wire. I forgot the stat. There's I think they said it was 5 games that came down to a game-winning field goal as time expired this week. I think that was even before I don't know if it was before or after the Monday night game, but I know it was like a record or something. So this one went down to the wire, and it was the Seattle Seahawks getting the win at home, 29-26 over the Washington Commanders. Kind of a slow start to the game. It was 9-9 at half. And even, going to the fourth quarter, it was 16-12. But in the fourth quarter, the scoring really kicked off there. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Seahawks beating the Commanders?
A good, resilient win from Seattle. The game it was a tough one. Like, it didn't necessarily go the way they wanted it to. I think early on, it was very clear, like from that first drive, that Washington came to play with that big screen to Brian Robinson. So, yeah, and then defensively too, Washington had a great start. Like, although it was tied 9-9 in the first half, like it was all field goals for Seattle. They could not really get into the red zone. They had that huge Kenneth Walker play, which gave them the momentum they needed late in the game to kind of start to get a lead there. And they moved the ball well, but I don't know. I was impressed by Washington despite the loss here. Like, they moved the ball efficiently. I mean, Sam Howell, another great performance, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, which Seattle's defense has kind of been their weakness, so I'm not super surprised by that. But overall, I feel like their defense played well too, despite the fact that they were a seller at the deadline, got rid of a couple people on the defensive line. They were still able to get pressure on Geno Smith and make him a little bit uncomfortable at times. I mean, just look at their Seattle's third down efficiency, 4 of 14. Like, they were able to do their thing. It didn't result in a win. Seattle came out on top, and that's an important one for them because they're still in the race to potentially win that division. But like I said, I was impressed from both teams, to be honest, because I don't think Washington is a slouch, and that's a good win from Seattle because Washington came out strong and they were able to respond. And then for Washington, they were able to perform and almost come out with a win against a really good team.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to shout out Eric Bieniemy. It seems like if there's coordinator of the year, I can't throw it to him because this Washington offense it seems like finally holding up their end of the bargain, and that's with Sam Howell, first year starting. I know he's not technically a rookie, but basically his rookie season. He sat out most of last year, except for the last week. And yeah, clean game in terms of turnovers. Just unfortunate that they couldn't get over the hump. I'm not sure if this is it seems to be an Andy Reid coaching tree thing. At least it's passed down to Bieniemy. It seems like I wish they'd be a little more patient with the run because Robinson was able to find holes in the run game whenever they did, and maybe it would create a little more balance and help. Adding the play action, I feel like will help the offense and help Sam Howell a little bit more. But yeah, kudos to Howell because still being able to he's basically being put almost in the same position that Stroud is and Houston, where it's like, hey, we're putting the game on your shoulders. We're not going to sit here and try to manage the game. So it's like, no, we're putting the game on your shoulders. You're going to have to make 10, 15 plus yard throws and basically win us the game almost at times, or at least put up points. And he's done that. Unfortunately, they're 4-6, but looking like a good building block, like you mentioned there. At least him and Bieniemy. And obviously, we know that talent, skill position wise, as you saw there, like you mentioned with the Brian Robinson touchdown, even Gibson getting involved and such. And it was a quiet day for Terry McLaurin too, and John Dotson. So obviously got to iron that out. So I mentioned that, and then Seattle's defense. You mentioned them too. I just find that they're a little bit too aggressive. Like Washington wasn't, like I mentioned, wasn't really running the ball, and they were still. I know they like to blitz and stuff, but I would like for them to be a little bit less, because you mentioned that one Brian Robinson touchdown. The big reason why it broke open was because they were so overly aggressive in Washington, and Howell caught him slipping and just kind of dumped it off to Robinson, and he kind of just ran, and he almost had another one like that later in the game too. So multiple times they caught Seattle slipping there. And in terms of the opposite side, you mentioned Seattle's offense still a little bit, for lack of a better phrase, constipated at times, especially on third down and such. Yeah, like oddly enough, like I would like for them to be a little bit more patient with the run, but ultimately I still feel like they don't really help their skill position players that much. They're not as creative, not a lot of motions and play actions off of that. I mean, one of the few times they did that was Kenneth Walker touchdown, because it was like a little play, and then Walker just leaked out and no one guarded him, and then he was able to show off his explosive running from there. But yeah, other than that, I mean, even that drive that set up the last field goal wasn't really creative. Like they ran DK Metcalf, 3-yard slant, which by the way, everyone ran slants on that play. They did the same exact play on second after they got the first down, incomplete, and then they changed it up and got a post. But once again, DK Metcalf lined up basically in the same side, left side, no motion. But kudos to Seattle, they figured it out. But that will just be a concern for me in regards to, and maybe why they have struggled against some of the upper echelon teams, is their lack of creativity and on offense. But nonetheless, like you mentioned, they find a way. They win it late at home and keep themselves, in a good spot in regard to the NFC playoff picture. So, yeah, good win for Seattle, and yeah, we'll see what happens with the Commanders going forward with Ron Rivera and the gang. But let's move over to the Sunday night game, which was close, but not very much exciting in terms of fireworks. But it was the Las Vegas Raiders getting Antonio. I forget their. Is it Anthony? I'm sorry. I always forget their.
Antonio Pierce.
I remember the last name. I didn't want to mess it up, but I did. Antonio Pierce gets second win as interim head coach, 2-0. They beat the New York Jets 16-12. Jets had a couple opportunities late, did not cash in. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Raiders' win here?
Good win. I mean, ultimately, their strategy seemed to be stop Breece Hall, win the game. And that's what they did. They stopped Breece Hall, and they won the game. Zach Wilson was able to kind of move the ball, but they weren't able to, I don't know. The stats feel a little deceiving. Like, he did have 263 yards, so I don't want to, discredit him. But they weren't able to, really put together complete drives, so they'd kind of be able to move it a little bit to start, and then things would just kind of stall out around midfield a lot. So yeah, I mean, the Raiders played good defensively. Antonio Pierce has got this team believing. They're now 5-5. They're not out of it. That's the interesting part here, is the Raiders are still somewhat decent, and competitive in terms of record. So sitting at 500, Josh Jacobs had a great week. Devontae Adams had a great week. Pierce afterwards was quoted saying, "I'm not stupid. I know who to get the ball to." That feels like a direct shot at Josh McDaniels, not going to lie, calling him stupid basically. And I mean, I can't say he's wrong, because Devontae's been frustrated a whole lot, and all of a sudden, Pierce takes over, and now Devontae has some of his best games on the year. So yeah, good for the Raiders. They came out, they had a good plan that they knew could get them the win. It wasn't the prettiest of wins, but they did what they needed to do. Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned obviously focal point for Raiders defense was to stop Breece Hall, and that's what I wrote down too. Just that's what the Jets offense is. It's Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson. They were able to contain them both. I know Garrett Wilson had 9 for 93, but like you mentioned, especially when the Jets cross half field, it's just things went haywire. Either there's holding penalties or sacks, a couple untimely sacks and things like that. Just it's one of those things that maybe Rodgers coming back, because apparently he says he's looking to be back full time in the building in Thanksgiving. I don't know if by Thanksgiving, so I don't know if that means it'll be fully practicing.
I've heard that he's aiming to play by mid-December.
That's what I've heard too.
That's what someone tweeted. Yeah, which means in a month. That's crazy to think.
It's crazy, and I'll see. I'll see what I believe it. I'm not trying to
exactly.
just because, anyways. But so yeah, I mean, once again, like we talked about before, Jets offense, like grass ain't greener with his Trevor Siemian. Like Zach Wilson was their leading rusher, so that shows you, like once again, like it doesn't always show the plays that he extends and tries to keep alive. And yes, it doesn't always end well and such, but it could be literally worse in regards to that. I know he had the bad pick late, and that is one of his weaknesses. He does tend to stare a guy down, especially, and he does tend to lose track of safeties. Then that was just a great play by Spillane, the linebacker, just reading his eyes and jumping the route. And yeah, I mean, I'm just not. It's funny they had a players only meeting today, and I guess you got to do that to get the momentum back or find a way to move forward. But yeah, I'm not sure what the fix is going forward exactly for their offense, but they got to figure that out. And on the flip side, yeah, Josh Jacobs obviously seeming like he's in form, and they're giving him the rock. Same with Devontae Adams, and we'll say like in regards to Josh Jacobs having success, I think we've seen a couple times this year where the Jets interior can be had in the run game if you're patient with it, because Jets are more like San Francisco. Obviously, saw it came from there where they're more predicated on speed, but they still have good size up front. Obviously, Quinton Williams, but some of the other guys more pass rush specialists like Jermaine Johnson and such, more smallerish guys. So just once again could be a concern for the Jets going forward. But yeah, I really didn't have much else because there wasn't much else to mention as it was okay football in regards to, hey, these are two teams that are still figuring it out. Obviously, both hovering around 500. And yeah, like you mentioned, Raiders 5-5, oddly 4-1 at home too. So, they still call it the Death Star? I don't know, but they're cooking at home. Really wish, I think I only passed like once or twice and noticed their stadium there. I wish I probably should have done more. But nonetheless, Vegas finds a way. They win this one, like I mentioned, 16-12. So we'll see if they can keep this momentum going with Antonio Pierce. Maybe Pierce can end up keeping that job, and they can build something off that. We'll see what the Raiders do going forward, and obviously we'll see what the heck happens with the Jets, and if Aaron Rodgers will come back from that injury, and obviously what he looks like, and obviously though what the next month will be crucial for them, and probably Zach Wilson for his outlook for his career. But let's go over to the Monday night game, last but not least, as the Denver Broncos get the win. Last-ish second field goal, 24-22 over Buffalo. In Buffalo, too, so that's tough. And obviously, Buffalo, as of today, fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, following the results. So what were your thoughts on the Monday Nighter, John?
Yeah, not a great result from Buffalo. And I mean, it starts with the first carry for James Cook as a fumble. Like, it was a bad day. James Cook fumbles the ball. Josh Allen has a couple interceptions, one which was Gabe Davis, straight off his hands. Like that, he gets credit for that. So, I mean, overall, like in terms of mistakes, man, it felt like it was rough, right? Like I said, 3 different guys having turnover problems, and Diggs isn't getting involved, and Trayvon Diggs is on Twitter not making it better by saying 14's got to get up out of there and all this kind of stuff.
Just stirring the pot a little more.
Yeah, which we know why Trayvon's doing it. He wants Stephon to come to Dallas, which who knows? Like, we'll see what happens in the future, but I don't know. It wasn't great. I'm not surprised by the Ken Dorsey firing. This offense honestly has not really looked the same since the Dayball stuff, like since he left. There were points last year early on where it was like, oh, like they're fine. But even then, eventually it felt like the problem with Dorsey was it seemed like eventually, right, like once teams kind of figure out what you're doing, you got to adjust. And it's sort of like, think about the the first couple, like 15 plays or so of a game, right? Those are on script. I'm thinking about it like from the fact of the first handful of games without Dayball, Dorsey is probably still running a lot of the Brian Dayball stuff, right? But then once the teams adjust and they're like, all right, we know what you're doing, we're going to try and take it away. Now you can't run the Dayball stuff because he's not there to tell you what the answer is, and you got to come up with your own stuff now. And all of a sudden it's not working as well. I'm not putting all the blame on Dorsey. We had our whole conversation last week about Buffalo's drafting of offensive players and how it's been pretty pitiful. So there's a lot of reasons that have led into it, but I'm not surprised by the Dorsey firing because I assume McDermott is kind of feeling the heat. And typically when that starts to happen, coordinators tend to be the first to go, right? Like while you're trying to save your job. And I'm not saying McDermott should be fired, but like the conversation is now being had. I even heard on the radio this morning, people are talking about, well, maybe, McDermott's kind of like what was his name? Mark Jackson for the Warriors. Like it feels like a team that's kind of on the cusp, but maybe just the guy who's currently there isn't the guy to get him over the edge. And who knows? That could be the Bills. It remains to be seen. I'm not going to say they're going to become a dynasty like the Warriors were, because that's unrealistic expectations for any team. But obviously they have talent. They're there. But they have some serious question marks that they need to address moving forward, just even going in the next week, man, because they're now at a spot where you got to look yourself in the mirror and be like, all right, this is a crucial stretch. We have not been looking good. Can we turn it around and make a playoff push and kind of quiet all the doubters? Because all of a sudden everybody's coming out and starting to talk about the Buffalo Bills, and saying that, they're a bad team and all these kind of things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to read too much into it simply because I do think that Denver is an underrated team as of right now. Like, they're looking good. They're hovering around 500. They just beat the Chiefs a handful of weeks ago. Now they beat Buffalo. Like, they're looking strong. They're kind of figuring out their identity and who they are and what Sean Payton wants them to be. And I think that's a direct reflection in the workload of Javonte Williams. Like, he's getting way more involved. And I think that's because Sean realizes, like, all right, we're not going to be the high scoring octane offense, and we don't necessarily love our receivers, considering that they've been in trade, like, rumor mill for, a year at this point. But we know that we got a good running back and honestly a stable of talented running backs. So let's really rely on them and then kind of figure out everything else from there. And it's working. And the defense is impressive too. So good win from Denver. It's, I don't know. They're kind of like Minnesota, like the Raiders. Like, it felt like a lot, like there was, doom and gloom, and yet here we are a little over halfway into the season, and they're in the mix. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they're in the mix, and that's kind of what you want at this point in the season from a team like that. So good win from Denver, and for Buffalo, certainly a lot of question marks that they're going to have to answer moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to Denver, I'm going to piggyback off that. I mean, I wrote down, Sean Payton's doing a great job of managing the offense, like you mentioned, like finding the balance of that. And then also, Russ, extremely efficient game, 24 for 29. Hey, he didn't light the world on fire with 193 yards, but no turnovers, which was a big issue for Russ last year. And we saw the offense was able to move and capitalize off some of the turnovers that the defense made. But also, like, in regards to playing to Russ's strengths, you saw a lot of when they did do play action, a lot of rollouts and just moving him around and getting him on the, because it seems like he just has a better feel. And also, I think we saw this game too. Like, he was more willing to, he had a better feel for the game. Like, he's more willing to run and escape and tuck it and run and such like that in certain moments. Something that we didn't see much last year. I remember I mentioned that a couple of times, and even just evading sacks. It seems like it was a little bit like Russell of old, where if there's not two guys there, if it's just one guy with his trying to arm tackle him, Russ is going to break the tackle and extend the play continuously. So, yeah, and already wrote Broncos patient with the run, and for the Bills offense, I mentioned this to you in our group chat, like their last full drive. They had the interception that led to a field goal, which once again that was on Josh Allen, absolutely. But the Buffalo drive before that was halfway through a second, like. That was when I think they put James Cook back in the game, and I don't know if you remember, they leaned on him. Like, they went I formation. They literally 1, 2, 3, 4 straight Cook runs. I mean, they also ran for Latavius Murray after that. I guess because Cook needed a spell, and then the touchdown was set up because Denver had to start respecting the run game a little bit, because that was the theme of that drive, was that Buffalo was just running it down their throats, and it kind of got Denver out of those, at least at that time, the 2 safety looks, but then. And maybe this is one of the reasons why Dorsey got fired. You come out in the first offensive drive after your defense forces a punt in the second half, and it's 4 straight passes, and you go 4 and out. Like, and I understand you have Josh Allen, but like once again, balance is key. And you just ran, and like because everyone keeps mentioning, because they think Denver's poor because of the 70-point game, but to actually use that game in context, they got ran over that game. Remember, that was Devon Achane running everywhere. And like Buffalo, you just had success doing that. Like, why not run it once or twice? It boggled me. I feel like that was a crucial point. I know they eventually tied it up, got the lead, but that was a point where Buffalo could have, really taken a stronghold of the game, and it felt like they didn't. And then, had a fumble later too, but from Josh Allen himself that didn't help. And he does deserve criticism for those for the turnovers. He has been a bit sloppy. Not all of them are his fault. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what direction this offense takes under Joe Brady now, as we mentioned, Ken Dorsey gone, and yeah, it'll be interesting because Joe Brady was the OC in Carolina, and that didn't really work out then either. So I don't have much confidence in regards to Buffalo being able to just magically turn this around and be back to what Josh Allen MVP year a couple of years ago. But hey, maybe Brady has been in the lab, or Joe Brady has been in the lab, and maybe he's making the most of his second chance. Who knows? We'll have to find out and see. And yeah, obviously the 12 man penalty was absolutely killer, by the way, and because they missed the field goal, and then you had too many men on the field, and it's not like they would have almost blocked. It's wild, and yeah, kind of unfortunate.
And that's I wanted to say too, that's a coaching thing. Yes. Because you need to have somebody out there that is counting every time, especially in big moments like that. And if you got to call a timeout or scream at somebody to sprint off the field, you got to do what you got to do. That's unacceptable. Obviously,
they didn't have any timeouts
for the. Well, yeah. I mean, then, like I said, then you got to scream at somebody hey, get off the field, and we've seen it before where guys full on dead sprint and dive to the sideline, at least show an effort there, because the coaches have to be aware that that's happening, or even ideally you're aware of it before they're fully lined up, you've counted as they're out there, and like I said. Because I was talking to, the reason I say this, I was talking to a coworker today, and he was mentioning obviously the players are out there, and I'm yeah, but do you expect the players to be counting themselves? I do think it should be the responsibility of every unit that there is one, whoever your captain is of the unit should be out there counting, right? But also the coaches should do it. You're not out there playing, you're not out there thinking about all that stuff. You have time to count. So and it should be coached too. You gotta have this figured out by now. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, situational football. And I mean, like you mentioned, there's usually a player that counts, that sits there and counts. And granted, I know it was an odd situation because they had to run out to the field because that's what Denver was doing because they didn't have a timeout. They were running their guys out in the field with 20 seconds left to line up and kick it. But yeah, it's on you. That should have been mentioned as the driver's going, hey, whoever's special teams, they may have to run out. So let's be ready. Just things like that, situational football, and obviously they dropped the ball there, and could have ran away with this one, and who knows, maybe who knows what the story would be right now if they're 6-4. Maybe no one's talking about them, But unfortunately, or the ball rolled a different, or unfortunately they had too many men on the field. That's their own damn fault. I'm not going to sit here and say it's fate. So shot themselves in the foot multiple times. Hard to win the NFL. Turnovers and poor penalties. So That's a wrap on week 10. Any other comments or anything you wanted to throw out there before we call it there?
That's going to be it.
All right. Well, as per usual, feel free to rate, review, and such. And we'll be back to share our week 11 picks against the spread later. So, as always, that'll do it for us.